and let's just roll. Cool. Let's roll.
Awesome.
Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much. We have a very special guest today, all the way from Texas. We have Q, and
Yes.
he's not only a father, a husband, and in the military, he also has an amazing podcast called Mediocre Dads, just sharing some wisdom about what it really means to be a father and to share what it is to be a man in this world today. And it's just had some really cool lessons. I watched a few of your episodes, and it's just really inspired me to want to be the person that I am today and just share more conversation with my father. And so here at the Legacy Project, we strive in just having open conversation and just really just letting anyone share their story. So thank you for dropping in and sharing the story today.
I appreciate you guys having me on. Like I was saying before, I'm excited. I was excited to come on here and really talk to y'all. I mean, I thought our conversation that we had, like kind of the intro call we did, was phenomenal. And I was like, man, I could tell two group of men who are, one, going to be awesome to talk to, but two, people I can learn from for myself, because I think that we can learn from each other in our own experiences, because we all have different experiences. So I'm really excited,
Yeah.
and thank you for having me on
Yeah.
your show.
Of
Yeah, man.
course.
I'll third that. As I've evolved, just as a man, and I'm looking at two young men, and I put it this way: like Albert and I were bookends, right? I'm the direct old guy, right? That's kind
Mhm.
of figure shit out in his own way, and then you have my son, who's the other bookend. It's kind of good cop, bad cop. And what I love the synergy that we've created is we're two different men, but the reason why we created this is because we still have men problems. We still have the same shit, whether it's a depressed state, whether it's anxiety, whether it's self-doubt, whether it's trying to figure out what it means to be a man, whether it's, is this the right direction? All these questions that we all have, that we, quite frankly, we grow up thinking about these things as we get older and into teenagehood and then manhood, and then we're men. Society says, okay, you're a man, and we're like, well, what does it fucking mean to be a man? So that being said, Q, my first real question to you is, I'm really curious about you, is like, when I'll give us a little bit of background like you did before, by the way, just kind of like give a little
Mhm.
bit of story of your upbringing so we have an idea. But my main question is, when did you finally, I guess, come to this point in time that you are a man? And then what is a man to you?
Man, so I'll give you the background, but to be very straight to the point with your question about when I found out I was a man, I found out I was a man when I stopped having to tell everybody else that I'm a grown man. And I like it's one of those craziest things,
Yeah,
and where I was like, man, I haven't had to say that in a long time.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
because when I turned 21,
Mm,
and my parents would call me and they would tell me this and that, and especially my dad, my response would generally be is, I'm a grown man. And and the reality is, it's like, sure, you're a growing adult
yeah.
who is classified as a man. However, in the context of a grown man, you're not a grown man. And so the moment I stopped having to tell people,
Yeah,
or remind people, if you will, that I was a grown
yeah,
man,
yeah,
that is when I realized, I was like, oh shoot, I'm a man. Like, this is
yeah,
what manhood is.
yeah.
And it's like I was telling you guys. So I was adopted
Mm,
at a very young age, at 2 years old, with my identical twin. And growing up, the image, or the person that I saw as a man, the picture, the person that really gave me that the best example, was my adopted dad. Now, I don't call him my adopted dad, but I say that for important context, right? Because for me, he is my dad.
mm,
But for such a long time, I had a hard time believing or understanding that, like, this is my dad,
mhm.
right? So I would try to pick and choose certain quirks or certain
Right.
characteristics in which I said, okay, this is how a man acts, or this is what a man does. So for an example, my dad he's a pilot. He flies for
Mm,
Southwest right now. And so he would, Monday through Thursday, say he would be flying, and then he would come home on Thursday, sleep, eat dinner, we talk, whatever the case might be. Friday, go to my brother's football game. Saturday, we up at the crack of dawn, and he would be doing chores around the house, the honey-do list, right? And he would be doing all these chores. And so he would get them done. And there was a lot of times he's taking apart this washer and dryer. And I'm like, how does he know how to do that? And he's taking it apart, doing all these things, putting it back together, going to Lowe's, going to Home Depot, doing all these things, right? And for me, I was like, okay, so this is mostly of what a man does. He takes care of his home, whether it's having to fix the washer and dryer, whether it's having to fix the I don't know, the fence in the backyard or whatever. He fixes things. That's what men do. He fixes things. And so that was one of the main core things that I took from my dad that said, okay, this is what a man does. As I got older and I joined the Army, and later on in my life, I realized everything that my dad did, he continues to do, is what a men do. And what it boils down to for me is men provide. Men are responsible to provide. It's been that way since the beginning of time, since Adam and Eve, when God crafted Eve from the rib of Adam and told Adam is, hey, you are in charge. You are responsible for everything within the Garden of Eden. And it was even when I relate to my Christian faith, but it's even when Eve ate the apple, because Eve was the one who was deceived and ate the apple. God didn't go to Eve. He went to Adam and he said, hey, who told you were naked? And the conversation was with Adam. And it was not to say, hey, Eve's not important, but he had already ordained and said, hey, Adam, you are the man here, and you are the most responsible one. So he talked to Adam and he told Adam what the consequences were going to be, right? And so I go back to that to say, being a man is being responsible. Being a man is taking care of your family, taking care of those around you, taking care of those people that are entrusted to you. And I know it's easier said than done, because obviously when you're actually doing the thing or you're taking care of your family, right? There's a lot more to it than just waking up and saying, okay, there's food on the table and everybody seems like they got clothes on their back. Right? Cool. I did my job for the day. I'm going to go sit back until I'm called upon. But actually there's a lot of little things that come up to that create the big picture. And that goes unnoticed when you're a man and when you're a dad, because to a lot of people from the outside looking in, it looks like you're just doing what you're supposed to do. You're just doing the thing that every man does, not realizing this little decision right here that you made on whether or not to fix this thing right now or pay someone to fix it impacts this decision over here, and then impacts the kids over here, because that means now you have to make time for the kids and their sports or what they're doing. So there's a lot to it, the little things that make up the big things. But ultimately, I say, a man is who takes care and provides. Sorry, a long way to get to a simple answer.
No, that's really powerful though, because I know my dad's actually shared whenever he talks about, hey, when you have and you didn't directly say this, but you insinuated it, when you are in a relationship, when you decide to get married, when you decide to have kids, a lot of times the first things that go, and I don't know if you can relate to this too, is he'll share with me like he felt like he was forgotten about once he had kids, because now your relationship that you had was very like romantic, you have all this time, and then now there's another person there's a child, right? And so yeah, you have to almost find your way, but is the way, the responsibility is the way, right? And so like if you I see you smiling too, because there's something there, right? Is like, as men, we have to realize like you almost have to be proactive. That is your responsibility, right? Is because if not, what else is going to happen? Like your wife is taking care of the kid, like nurturing them and stuff like that. So you have to be there to support her and them simultaneously. So I don't know if you felt that way when you were first with your firstborn.
Oh, 100%. The moment my oldest, her name's Nevaeh, the moment Nevaeh showed up, it was like, Queon is a thing of the past. He is a person that he exists. He's the dad. He has his responsibilities. But I'm talking going to see, the in-laws. It was, we're getting out of the car, and when we're getting out of the car, it's, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you guys for so long. I miss you hugging us. It's come here, Nevaeh. Oh, Nevaeh, I missed
Mhm.
you. The 20 minutes are spent with my daughters. And then I'm like over here just like, man, we're chopped liver now. Which is a double-edged sword though, because at the same time, now that I'm chopped liver, I have someone to watch my kids. So like I can go to the back room for 20 minutes and no one asks where Quan is. Because I'm like, they only care about the kids. So it's pretty
Yeah,
cool after
yeah,
a while when
yeah,
you're like
yeah.
when you realize it's an actual superpower rather than people forgot about you. But
Mhm.
initially it did sting because I was, I, not I'm used to being the center of attention, but it was kind of like a it's like, dang, like, does
Mhm.
anybody like, hello, hey,
Mhm.
I'm real here. I still exist.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you want to ask me how work is? No?
yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Got it.
So here's what I learned about that, and thanks for bringing it up, Albert, because it's getting me down a rabbit hole. So what I had to realize is the reason why it stung for me so much, because it had to deal with a childhood wound that I didn't know about. And that
Mm,
childhood wound was I was pretty much abandoned by my mom at 6 years old.
got you.
So my entire life was really looking for validation. And so one way was through sports, one way is through scholastics, one way was through women, and then relationships, and I became a dad. All these things happen, and at the core of it, I was seeking validation because I didn't know how to self-validate. So for you, as I'm going down that rabbit hole with you, and you acknowledging that came up to you, tell us a little bit about your background, um, as far as your parents, because you brought up something unique about them. And
Mhm.
then you brought up your brother a little bit. I know Albert and I were curious about your twin brother, and I'm curious, did he grow up with you as well? And tell us a little about that relationship between you and him.
Yeah. So me and my twin brother were identical twins. And it's crazy. So context, my birth parents they had us when they were 15 years old.
Oh,
And
wow.
so we've all been 15 before.
Mm-hmm.
Could you imagine having twins at 15 years old?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
No,
Yeah.
you'd be like, heck no, I'm not taking care of no kids at
Yeah.
15
Yeah.
years
Yeah. Yeah.
old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so they had their own issues going
Mm-hmm.
on, where my birth mom, she was dealing with that she had just lost her grandmother, or no, I'm sorry, she was about to lose her grandmother to cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and so she was going through that emotionally. And then my birth dad, his mom had just gotten out of prison, and
Oh, wow.
so there was this the economy of
That's
just
crazy.
like, yeah, like friction, friction within their
Mm-hmm.
with between each other,
Yeah.
and which this led to where they were both living at his house or his mom's house, right, for that time. And she was like, hey, I'm going to take the boys to go
Mm-hmm.
to see their grandma before she
Mm-hmm.
passes, and basically his mom was like, hey, if you take the boys, we know you're not going to come back. Now I
Wow.
don't know the internals of what was going on
Yeah.
specifically at the time, which led to that belief. But I guess it was understood that ultimately if she left with us, she was going to come back, and both parties understood that. And she was like, hey, his mom said, hey, if you leave with the boys, we know you're not going to come back. And if you leave, we're going to call the cops and we're going to take you to the court.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this ended up happening, and they took her to court, and the judge deemed both of them,
Unfit. Yeah.
not insufficient. They can't take care of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you have a mom who just got out of prison, obviously the court's going to be like, I don't think that's a safe
Yeah.
home for them,
Yeah.
regardless of what that
Yeah.
individual did. And then when you have her, she's she's not living with her mom, living with them, and doesn't really have a suitable home for us as well. It's kind of like, hey, they had to go in the system, you know. And so we went in the system, and fortunate for us, we were 2 years old, but we got adopted basically immediately. We were officially adopted when we were 6 years old. So my brother did grow up with me,
Mm-hmm.
So again, even within that, you usually don't get that where,
Mm-hmm.
twins or even
Yeah.
siblings get the opportunity to grow up with each other. So we were very blessed to
Mm-hmm.
be able to grow up with each other.
Yeah.
And so we had our own language. I remember to this day showing up to the house for the very first time, and us running, getting out of the minivan. It was this olive green minivan, running out of this minivan, going into this house, having no idea where we're going, but we
Mm-hmm.
find this room. They kind of pointed like, this is going to be a room, and we immediately go in the closet, and we're just hiding in the closet, just kind
Wow.
of sitting there, just like, and we have It's crazy. Twins have as kids, they make up their own language.
Yeah.
I have no idea what we were saying to each other. I don't think we knew what we were saying to each other, but we were saying things, right? And we used to call each other dit dat, and we would have this conversation, but we were sitting in the closet hiding, and they allowed us to hide in the closet and just kind of get comfortable
Yeah.
with our surroundings. So there's a little context of like
Yeah,
how
yeah.
it was like that initial first part. But as we grew up, me and my brother, everything he does gets pinned on me. Everything I do gets pinned on him. But the only things that people pay attention to were the bad things that we did.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
And we were bad kids as we got older. We weren't doing what we were supposed to.
Mhm.
And whether it was being disrespectful or being rude in class or trying to be class clowns. But everything he did, it was, oh, that's Quees and Quan, even though that was a Quees thing. But everything I did, oh, that's Quees and Quan. And it was like, oh, I'm the one who did that.
Yeah.
Right.
Association.
Yeah, a lot of association.
Yeah.
But so when we started seeing that more, and we started seeing it more in 8th grade and then freshman year of high school, we kind of split, like not in a there was not a formal conversation where we're like, hey man, you do your thing, I'm gonna do my thing. But we both were like, hey, I need independence. I need to figure out what that looks like for me, and you need to figure out what that looks like for you. And so we had our core friend group that we were best friends with, but he also had football friends and other people that he met, that he hung out with. And I had my friends, my basketball friends, and others that I hung out with. And that's kind of how we made formed our own level of independence, of being able to be like, those are your friends. I'm not going to try to encroach and be their friends, but like, we're acquaintances. They know me. I say what's up to them.
Yeah.
We talk, whatever the case might be, but I know and understand those are his friends, and I'm not here to take his friends, if you will, because again, that association, we wanted that independence. Because as a twin, as I said, it was, if I did something, is, oh, does your brother do that too? I don't know. I'm not in class with him. Yeah. They won't let us be in class together. They would never let us be in class. As we were growing up, we could never be in the same class together. It was like, you will not be in the same class. And so we did the whole independence thing, but then that got worse, that separation, when we both joined the military. I joined in November of 2013. He joined in May of 2014, and he went his own way to DC. Wow. And I was stationed in Fort Hood, Texas, just 2 hours from where I am now, doing my thing, learning and growing in my own way. But it was like that upbringing in the military changed us differently. So his upbringing, while basic training, it was the same, his upbringing, if you will, of different leadership and his different job, led him down that path. And my different leadership led me down my own path. And because I was already married at that time, that's when the separation started to be really noticed. It was you started to really see the difference in, like, oh, you guys are twins, but like, Quan's married and, he's getting ready to have his first kid. Queese is in DC and he's got a girlfriend, or he doesn't have a girlfriend at the time. And he's kind of just, doing his own thing, taking selfies, doing his thing, and just kind of really doing the young man's thing, really experiencing the young man life, if you will, of the 20 and the 21, and doing what they do, going out to clubs and really experiencing that. I didn't experience that at all. The whole club scene or doing that, because I was married. And by the time I was 23, I was having my first kid. So totally different. But now, man, I talk to my brother. We don't talk a lot. He's super busy. His life is out of the military now. He drives trucks, but he's up in Dallas. It's crazy. He's in Dallas, and we talk every so often. I call him, and when we do talk, we talk for about an hour or so, have that back and forth. We might get on each other, whatever the case might be. And then after that, we're kind of like, we're good. All right, man. I get you. I know you're my brother. I'm your brother. And if you call me right now, say, hey man, I need you down in San Antonio to help me out. Or if you called me, say, I need you in Dallas to help me out. He knows, hey man, give me 4 hours, because that's a 4.5 hour drive, even with me speaking. And I'll be there. You know what I mean? So like, that's kind of where we're at, but it's awesome. I'm just allowing him, I want him to feel that independence and want him to grow. One thing I will say is, and I believe it's related to your question, was with our birth parents, it was really important, especially our birth mom, to build that relationship. So he has an actual relationship with our birth mom and our
Mm,
siblings, our step siblings, basically. Yeah, our step siblings.
mm,
So he has a relationship with them, whereas I don't. And
yeah.
I chose not to have a relationship with them. And it's not that I don't like them. It's not
Mm,
like I don't want anything to do with them. But for my brother, that feeling that I think I was telling you guys about, where of just really wanting to know where you came from and knowing
yeah.
why you were the way you are, he needed that more, and he needed that validation from the person that
Yeah.
made him, right?
Mm,
And I love my brother, and I appreciate it. I love, and if he needs that, I want that for him.
mm,
But I told him, I was the opposite. I said, hey man, listen, and I don't need that. I know who I am. And it took me having my kids at a young age to
mhm,
understand who I was, and
mm,
knowing that I don't need the validation of others to know who I am.
mm,
I need the people in my home. That validation matters to me.
yeah.
So if my wife says, hey, no, you're a great man, you're a great husband, that's what matters to me. That's the
Mm,
validation I need. If my kids say, dad, I love you, or they're doing a great job, that's enough validation right there. When I come
mm,
home, my kids are saying, daddy, and they're screaming, super excited to see me. That's all the validation I need to say, I'm doing what I'm supposed to
mm,
do as a man. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do as a
mm.
husband. So
Beautiful.
I love it. So there's a lot there. I
Yeah.
think the biggest thing was about your brother and you just kind of finding yourself. And I think that's what I really wanted to touch on too more is like,
mm,
since you had to grow up so quickly,
Mm,
like uh, on your pre-call, you mentioned that it felt like the military was almost impressed on you. Is that
yes.
accurate to say? Yeah. And so like I kind of want to take us a few steps back because for me, and it doesn't seem like it's uncommon with a lot of younger people, is sometimes they feel like they are forced to do things,
Mm,
because this is the way, it's tradition. This is like what you're supposed to do, right? And so getting rid of all the supposed to do's and having a little bit of hindsight going in, like when did you know that you felt like you were doing things your way?
mm,
Like, I think that's another definition of a man too, is like, when did you know that this was something that Q was doing to make sure that he was taking the steps to become this new version of yourself?
this is going to sound really cheesy. But when I adopted my first dog, it was a German Shepherd. I've
mm,
always wanted a German Shepherd, and me and my wife were like, "Hey, we should get a dog," because my parents wouldn't let me have the dogs that I grew
mm,
up with. They're like, "No, these are our dogs."
mhm.
And I was, yeah, but like, that's she's always been mine. Her name was Zoe, or I'm sorry, her name was Bella, they were like, "Yeah, no, we actually kind of like them and love them, so they're our dogs." And so I was like, okay, I want to get a German Shepherd. And we wanted to adopt a dog, rather than try to go purebred route, because it's very expensive. And we found this organization in Austin that, depending the breed of the dog, you would just pay for essentially the cost to what it was to house another dog, another German Shepherd.
Mm,
And so in the end, I end up paying, if you will, $250 for my 4 month German Shepherd. But that was the first time that Quan and Aubrey, my wife, right, but mainly for me, made our real decision for ourselves and said, this is what we're going to
mm,
do. And we may not be thinking about the future and what owning a dog looks like. But we were like, this is the decision. This is
mm,
what we're going to do. And we did it.
mm,
When I did it, I remember it as clear as day. My dad was tried to talk me out of it and try to get
mm,
me to return the dog. Like, well, maybe you should consider it, understand, like, it's a big deal owning a dog. You know, there's a lot of responsibility in feeding the dog, and then you got pet fee or vet fees, and have you looked into what living on base with a dog looks like? So
yeah.
giving me all these things that an experienced or seasoned person would think about. And I was like, nah, I already got the dog. it's
Yeah.
I was like, nah, the dog's on the leash right now in the car. Matter of fact, do you guys want to meet us at we met at PetSmart because my parents were visiting. I made us at PetSmart, and you can meet our dog. And you guys are gonna go back to San Antonio and fly out, and we're gonna go back to Colleen, and we're gonna,
Mm,
we're going to take our dog home it was like taking your kid home. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm,
we're taking
mm,
our dog home. But
mm,
that was the
mm.
first time that me got to make a
Mm.
decision that I was like, this is my decision.
Yeah.
No one else's. This is a decision I'm making for myself. And if it's a bad decision, I'll figure it out on the back end. I'll figure out what that looks like. But if it's a good decision, which it was, then, haha, I'm going to show them. And it was a mixture of both. He
Yeah.
definitely has ruined a lot of things in my house, and all of my houses. But nonetheless, it was still a good decision because, again, it taught me what making a decision and sticking with that decision looks like.
So what I'm curious about you, Q, is like you and I talked before, like you're a more polished version of me at 29.
I appreciate that.
I had 3 kids. I was married. I was so green and I had no direction.
Mhm.
I'm just curious with you where you're at, like being adopted
Mhm.
and being adopted by, you had also said that they're a different race, correct?
Yeah, all white family.
Yeah. So you have that. And then now becoming a fatherhood. My question, curiosity really is, if you could sum up, like, what did fatherhood change in you that made you more grounded and less, I'm not saying you were toxic, but less unsafe as a man?
Having daughters.
Mm,
When I think, and Albert, I think you can probably relate to this. When you want to have kids, you probably imagine yourself having sons, or at least one son in a way. And even yourself, Albert, you
yeah.
imagine, when
Mm,
I met, but probably when you had kids, you're like, man, I have sons. This is what
mm,
being a man
Right.
is. You have sons,
yeah.
these young men looking up to you. You know what I mean? Like, and you get to develop and mold and develop
Mm,
them and mentor
mm,
them. My first 2 kids are my daughters.
mm,
Now, I love my daughters with every fiber in my being. Like,
mhm,
there is it's one of those things where I never thought that I could get or have people make me cry or
mhm,
want to cry thinking about them. That is how
mhm,
much, like, just how much inside me I love
yeah.
my daughters so much with every fiber in my being. Um, but it really was having my daughters and realizing, okay, I was a piece of shit. And so in my, like, whole 100%, I was a piece of shit. And so if I have to, if and
Mhm,
immediately when I had my daughters and they start growing up so fast, and you realize, okay, at one point they're going to be 15,
mhm,
16, 17, and they're going to start dating and having, whether I don't want them, I want them to or not, they're going to start dating,
mhm,
and they're going to have boys in their life. And if I saw a young Quan in their life, I'd punch that dude in the mouth and I would
mhm,
say, hey man, look, if you come in this house, you're not leaving. You're
mhm.
gonna leave in a body bag. I don't know what to tell you. Like,
Yeah,
this is like, it's not a threat. It's a promise. It's a guarantee. I
yeah,
pay the bills on this house, not you, not these little girls. And I love everything. I love
yeah.
everything for them. Uh, so if you want to interact with my daughters, you can do that at school. But if you
Mhm.
come to my house, well,
Yeah.
come correct. You know what I mean? Like, it was having them and realizing that, I'm a piece of shit. And
Mhm.
want them why would I want to show them that being a piece of shit is good? So
Yeah,
when they in the future have to be in their relationships, they're
yeah.
like, no, you're just like my dad, and I
Yeah.
have to see this young man
Mhm,
who has time, still needs to grow. Don't get me wrong,
mhm.
but ultimately, at the core,
Yeah.
is just is not in it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
I don't know why my father-in-law, 19 years old,
Mhm,
after basic training, well, even the middle of basic training, if you will, but in the middle of basic training, allowed me to write him a letter asking him to marry his daughter, knowing that was the future. And he said, and when he responded to me, he said, talk to me in person.
mhm,
Um, and when I talked to him in person, he had already made the decision it was going to be yes.
mhm.
19 years old. My wife is still in high school, finishing high school
Wow.
when I ask her to marry me. So she's walking around in high school, the same high school that we both went to,
Wow.
because we're high school sweethearts, and with a wedding ring, an engagement ring, and people are like, are you engaged? And she's like, yeah, I'm engaged. And they're like, what to who, when, how,
Wow.
what, where? And you're like, and everyone still knows me and my brother because we were, we're the two twins of the school. And so they're like, oh, you're engaged to Queon? You're engaged to one of the twins? Oh wow, like like you can hear the uncertainty, like, are you sure that's a good decision? You know what I mean? Um, but it was really just kind of my daughters changing me and making me realize, like, I want to give them the best version of me.
Yeah.
In order for me to give the best version of me, I have to make sure I come correct every single day. I have to make sure that, when I'm joking around with their mom, I make sure they understand it's a joke. When me and her mom or their mom are going at it, right, because we're having a disagreement, I have to make sure, even though I raise my voice and I'm at a high level, I have to make sure that they understand this is something that parents and adults or people in a relationship do. They argue, but at the end of the day, they come back together and they're able to say, hey, I love you. And, I was mad at you, or you were mad at me, and we were disagreeing, but our kids were able to see us argue, but then come back together and say, my parents argue, but that's normal. All parents argue, but they're able to come back together at the end of the day, and they're able to see what love looks like in their parents, especially how a man is supposed to love a woman. So when my daughters get to that age and when they're dating and potentially even getting married, they're able to pick out the right man to say, hey, I know what right looks like because my dad loved my mom and I know what that looked like. And so I know how I'm supposed to be loved and how I need to be loved. And if you're not doing that, then you are not the person for me, because my dad he was awesome and amazing, and he gave my mom everything that she needed, and that's what I need from a man.
Wow. The one thing that comes to mind from that, other than it's just impeccable to see like the maturity and like understanding, like, hey, I know I'm gonna mess up at times, and I'm also gonna do great. And no matter what, I'm gonna wake up with the same enthusiasm. Like, hey, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is that's what we start the conversation with, right? So
Mm.
I guess your daughters, right? It's a little different than if you do it with sons, right?
Yeah.
And so is there, with a little bit of understanding of who you are more and more, is there a way that you want to have them approach you as being a relatively new father, right? In that when they do end up wanting to date, is there some tactic that you've already kind of thought about, like when they do start dating, that on how you want them to approach you? And then is that something based off of how your parents treated you when you were younger? Like if you asked about dating or something like that too, is there some context that you can share with new parents that might ease their minds?
Yeah, so again, it's different for boys and girls. When young men are at that age when they're ready to date, and their bodies have gone are going through those changes. Uh, even the young women are going through changes, but for the boys, it's obviously there's a lot of changes going on, that feelings that you've never felt before, and any form of excitement can throw you off. You're like, oh, hey, I'm too excited. You need to calm down. You're too excited, right? Um, it was one of those things where I honestly, for my daughters, it's a conversation where I want them to feel comfortable to come to me. I want them to feel like, hey, I want them to be able to say, hey, sit me down and say, hey, dad, I want to start dating, and us have a dialogue about this, right? Because I believe dialogue is one of the most beautiful things that we can do. And as our kids get older, the time to have dialogue with our kids, or at least open the floor up to dialogue, isn't when they're 21 and they've already made a few bad decisions and now you're trying to correct those bad decisions and help them get on track. No, the time for dialogue and the time to really start letting your kids know that you're open for dialogue is at a young age, when they're about, I'd say 12. I talk to my daughter now, and I get, and I try to explain a lot of things to her, but sometimes she doesn't understand, right? She's still only 6. And a lot of this is just a one-way conversation. But as she gets older, as she starts to build her own experiences, and around 12, again, when her body starts going through these changes, I want there to be a conversation. I want there to be a dialogue. I want to understand why she wants to start, why she feels like she's ready to start dating, but also understand why mom and dad, but especially dad, is like, okay, this is why I'm hesitant to believe that you're ready to start dating. But okay, if I say you're ready, if I agree to it, what does that look like? Right. Let's
Mm.
think about from the beginning to the middle to the end. What does that look like? What is your desired end state with dating? Right. Because young people, when they say, I want to start dating, they're doing it because their peers are doing, and they feel the peer pressure of like, oh, I need to start dating because that's what people my age are doing. And that could lead to other things, right? But ultimately, for what I want for my daughters is to be like, Dad, I want to start dating. And it's like, okay, do you have a boy that you like? I do have a boy I like. Okay, tell me about him, right? Well, his name's Benjamin. Okay, well, tell me about Benjamin. What does Benjamin like to do? What's Benjamin's work ethic? How does he act in school, right? And having these conversations to have them start thinking about like, oh, maybe Benjamin is cute, but maybe Benjamin is not the boy for me because he is the class clown. He is the one who's most of the time he's in the office or in
Right.
trying to either getting suspended and expelled. And I'm speaking here from experience, guys, because I was the boy that was in the office who was suspended. I was the boy who was in the office almost potentially getting expelled for ample amount of reasons. So I didn't realize the consequences at the time showing up to my girlfriend's house, who now my wife, and having to talk to her parents and explain to them why I got suspended from school. Like, what did you do? Or why my grades were bad. Right. So I didn't think of the ramifications of that at the
Right.
time. But again, having kids, having especially daughters, these are the things that I think dads start speaking or thinking of and like, okay, this is not just an easy decision where you just wake up one day and they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, go start dating and you know all the right things to do, you know what to do. Like, no, we have to lead and we have to mentor our kids. And it's not as easy as we think it is because our kids are not going to want to listen to us because they don't think we know. They
Right.
think we're too old. Like I think Albert, you can probably attest to this. How many times, when your kids were growing up and you were having this conversation with them and trying to, mentor them and say, hey, this is what I would do, or if I were in your position or your shoes, and you could see the look in their face of like, you don't really know what you're talking about, like
Yeah.
as if
Yeah.
you've never been 21 before, right? But they're like, you probably don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, even if you do, that was way back when. That like
Yeah.
you don't know what the times are like now. It's not like you're living every single day going to work and dealing with young people. No, no, no. You have no idea what it's like to be my age in this generation, in this era. It's totally different from when you were coming up. So you don't have your input is actually not really valuable. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you have to navigate that when you're talking to your kids. Because again, all kids do it
Yeah.
where they don't think their parents understand, when the people who probably understand the most are your parents,
Yeah.
because they went through the same exact thing you went through, which is different. It was just a different generation. So
100%. So we got about 10, 12 minutes left, and just want to leave it open real quick. And do you have any questions for Albert and I?
yeah, I was thinking about this. So for yourself, the first question you asked me, it's what it really stands out to me. When did it click where you're like, hey, I am a man?
Yeah,
Right.
I have an answer,
Okay.
and I'm going to be really
ready.
frank with you.
Okay.
4 years ago.
4 years ago.
Yeah, let me tell you why.
Okay.
Is I was a male
Mm-hmm.
for 47 years.
Yeah.
I was a male.
Mm-hmm.
I had the appendages. I looked like a man, but the way my internal instinct was, I didn't have the fortitude to understand what real responsibility was.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I lost my kids for a little bit. I lost them for about 2 years.
Wow.
It wasn't until I did some irresponsible things as a 47-year-old man that caused my family to separate from me.
Mm-hmm.
And this version you see of me now, that's why I say you remind me of a just more well-tuned version of me at 29, is because the way you're talking now at 29, I learned how to talk at 48.
Wow.
Even though I was a dad, even though I was a
Mhm.
young dad, even though I was a husband, even though I had all those things that you do as a father, I wasn't the leader or responsible, safe, secure man that I needed to be for my kid's mother, my ex-wife. I just got by, if I'm being really honest. And Albert
Yeah.
knows the story already. But this version of me now, I became a man when I became responsible for me.
Mhm.
That's my definition of man, is to be responsible for yourself first. Because when you're responsible for yourself first, now you have accountability and now you have the right to expect a standard from others who are in your sphere. But if you don't have self-respect, your people aren't going to respect you and that you can't lead them. Therefore, you can't be responsible for them.
Yeah.
That's what I had to take out of that. And so now the version you see of me now is I walk the talk. I talk the walk. I am you, just 22 years older than you.
Yeah.
But it took me going through the life experiences to get me at 47 to where I had to be literally shaken to death in order to get this version of me out who you're seeing now.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's crazy because, some people will look at it as in like, oh man, hey, shame on you. And it's like, no, I think we all have our own experiences.
Mm-hmm.
This is just mine and that's yours. But
Mm-hmm.
you're able to sit there now and explain it to people, and people are like, you say 4 years ago, but I'm like, there's no way, because the person I see in front of me, I was like, you've been this way this entire time. And like, you know what I mean? Like it's amazing. So
Mm-hmm.
like, I commend you, and I think it's amazing, that transformation, that where you've been able to come and the things
Mm-hmm.
you've been able to achieve in such a short time frame.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to ask, younger Albert.
Mm-hmm.
So, you do a podcast, or you do your own podcast, but you also do this with your podcast with your dad, right?
Mhm.
And you hear his stories, and you hear his experiences, and some things maybe you've never heard before, but or you've heard a little other details but not the full context of it, right?
Mhm.
Of his experiences. And so for yourself, hearing those things, right, I'm sure it has a heavy impact on you and a heavy burden, because you're like, I love my dad, but I don't want to make the same mistakes my dad made.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? At the same time. So has that made you, second guess yourself, and even potentially what relationships look like, and what marriage and kids looks like, and when that happen, when you want that to happen for you?
That's a great question. I know my dad's asked different forms of that, and it's something hit different. I think for me right now is the first part. Well, the first thing that I think of is when you're talking about your daughters and like the difference between sons is I've already made in my mind. I know you can't manifest it directly or not, but I want to have a son. I'm predicting I'm gonna have a son, but I also want to have a daughter. You
Mm-hmm.
know, that's how I grew up. I have two older sisters. I think that's balanced me up really well. And just FYI too, I'm the fourth, so I want to carry the legacy name as well too. That's part of the
Oh,
reason why
awesome.
we built this is the prerequisite for Mrs. Chavez is it's going to be Albert the Fifth. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit of
So-
context for myself too. I've known that since I was young, but I think now there's more direction rather than just this is what it's going to be,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
Mhm.
so the reason why I bring that up is because with my dad, it's been interesting. I lived a completely different life than what he did.
Mm-hmm.
I know he said that he was just a man 4 years ago and he was just getting by, whatever that means. Like to me, he was a good father, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mhm.
was not in the same position that he was growing up. He dealt through a lot of stress, a lot of turmoil to just be very surface level, right? And I lived in suburbia growing up for a little bit. And so it was way easier. They set me up for success growing up to go to college and to make my own, you know. With that being said, hearing the stories, I've heard some of them over time, and you're not going to share that with your kids, right? And just let it all
Mhm.
out, right? Like there's going to be some details missed, and
Mm-hmm.
We're
he's
gonna
shared
admit
multiple.
certain truths. Yes.
Right. There's certain truths, and then also like you just don't need to share that with
Mm-hmm.
your kids when they're 8, and then maybe
Mhm.
like when they're 15, you hear a little bit more, right? And then
Mhm.
I've heard like multiple stories, probably seven to 10 times now.
Mm-hmm.
And even now when he shares it, there's been details, and I'm like, oh, I don't remember you saying that. And that could be just a comfortability thing with us now. but it just gives me more perspective on not only just what not to do, because I think a lot of people love not doing something,
Mhm.
but having your direction. I think that's what you touched on when you said you
Mhm.
got the German Shepherd, is
Mhm.
your parents might have said like, "Hey, this is ours, right? You're not getting this, right?" And then,
Mhm.
but you decide to do it. So there's four walls on a two-dimensional plane, right? There's the not to
Mhm.
do's, but there's also what you want to do, and that is how you create the boundary. And that's the best way I can describe it.
Mhm.
Is seen what he's done. I've been put in a position to be like, "Hey, I can do this.
Mhm.
Now, what do I like in
Yeah.
those boundaries, right?" And I think that's the pillars that people don't understand is I can choose what I like to do, not just
Mhm.
what I don't want. And that can be very hard to do. And so that was something that I've taken a lot out of our relationship right now is
Yeah.
he's been able to show me stuff and I can learn. And same with my other, my mentor, my business partner, my friend Clinton, the one on Front Porch Chronicles. He's very similar to my dad too. So I get these two different sides of the same coin, and they show me different ways and they mentor me in different ways as well too, of what they've done and
Mhm.
their crutches and how it can be relatable to me.
That's awesome. I always tell I told this to one of my previous guests, and that was, having the title of dad, right? And I know the younger Albert, I don't think you have kids yet. I don't
Mhm.
believe you do. But
Mhm.
yeah, you don't have kids yet. So, but having or gaining the title of dad is it's the best title you can get. It literally is the best title you can have, because it literally transforms you in the perspective that people have of you from that point on. And one of the most beautiful things about it, though, and this is even kind of related to my personal story, though, is, you know, I thought dad meant this person has to be blood related. They have to be the person who more or less created me. I came from this person. That is what being with the title of dad is reserved from are reserved for, but that's not the case at all. And, I learned that when I was 20, 25-ish, that I was like, man, I've been sitting here trying to figure out the who my dad is. And I've had him this entire
Yeah.
time because everything I do I've gotten from all my quirks are my dad. It's the white version of me. Right. And so, like, literally, if you see me and my dad together and and whatever the case might be, people are like, I don't know what it is, but those guys have the same mannerisms. They do a
Mhm.
lot of things together. Right. I don't know, are they related? Maybe my eyes are
Wow,
deceiving me. You
that's
know what I
cool.
mean? But like, it's crazy because it's like, but like that's my dad, and that's just where I
Mhm.
got all my quirks from. So
Yeah.
for you, I think it's amazing, right, that you're doing something like this with your dad, and they're having a willingness for him to do it as well, because one, it builds that relationship, it builds that bond for you guys, and then also it shows when you have kids, like, man, I want my relationship with my dad to be like what my dad's was with his,
Mhm.
because I see it. They do their podcasts and I've seen some of their shows, and and you're just like, I want to bond with my dad like that. I think it's so inspirational to have. And
Mhm.
so your kids will seek that with you. And I know based off of just the brief conversations that we had, even with this meeting, I know that you're going to be open to that, and your kids are going to be like, man, my dad's the freaking best, and grandpa, he's freaking jacked, and he's old, and it's freaking awesome. And it's so I love it. I love it.
Yeah, on that note, I'll say this. One of the biggest gifts I'll give you, Q, is this, is I had to learn this, is there's going to be a point in time where, and I hope this doesn't happen to you, but it happens in relationships in general. There's ebbs and flows, right?
Mhm.
There's going to be a point in time where you are going to lose your kids to whatever decisions you make or something. And that's where they're watching you the most. They're watching
Mhm.
everything. Your kids are going to do everything you don't want them to do. And they're going to emulate everything you don't want. The things you want them to do, they're not going to do. That's just a fact. And you know that because you were a kid.
Mhm.
I'm going to tell you this. There was a point in time where I knew from my background and my father, I did not respect my dad. I
Mhm.
tolerated him. Didn't know that karma was going to be placed upon me, where
Mhm.
I was a really good dad to my kids. I was. But there was a point in time when I lost them because I fell back to the character who I really was inside.
Mhm.
The dad version was a role, right? So what I had to learn was at some point in time, my kids tolerated their father.
Yeah.
I had to earn their respect. And you earn their respect as adults by being the man you've always meant to be, with the habits that you show and tell and showcase and act. They will see that as adults. And so I will tell you that, there's times where I know my kids respect me. I know they admire me, and I'm not looking for that, but the byproduct is who I've become because I wanted to become this man that I always admired to be. I just didn't know how to do it. And so my gift to you is that when you get a point in time where your kids, just like your wife, respects you, and they're like, "That's my fucking dad over there."
Yeah.
Like that dude is my fucking dad. That is something that is earned. And we can get to that point. I'm going to tell you it's the best feeling in the world, because then that trickles down to your granddaughter, your grandkids. My granddaughter will never know that part of me that my kids saw. She'll never fucking know that. Like literally, she's like, "Puppies," and she runs to me. And that's a great feeling. Now, my kids did that differently, but because they were my kids.
Yeah.
But this young lady sees me differently, and my energy is differently. So, anyways, I'm going that rabbit hole. I know we're going to quit here in a little bit, but I just want to give that gift. Dude, I really, really appreciate just who you are, dude. Like, it's been an honor to talk to you, and hopefully we can collaborate a little bit more and go down a rabbit hole, because I think there's something here that we can spin off of. So, loved having you on our show, brother.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on. It means a lot to be on other people's shows and to one, not be the one leading the podcast, but also to be able to be to allow people, or for people to allow me to kind of vocalize some of the things that I can't on my show because I have guests on, and it's not about me at that time. So I definitely appreciate it, and thank you guys for having me on. It's a big it means a lot to me, and it's a big deal. So
yeah, thank you, Q. We appreciate you. If we do collaborate, there are some other rabbit holes I think I've learned more about you that I would like to explore, just because
absolutely,
I'm curious. I always want to dive just a little bit deeper on stuff like that too, and just pick your brain on military stuff, family life, and all that stuff. But I'm just so thankful again that you made the opportunity to do this, and we're looking forward to hearing more about your podcast and your endeavors on Mediocre Dads and being a great father.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you, guys. I will say this for Mediocre Dads, and it's my slogan. It's a big deal. It means a lot to me, and why it's called Mediocre Dads. But being mediocre is a choice, and you have to refuse to be mediocre every single day. We can wake up and we can be crappy dads, or we can wake up and say, "I'm going to give the best version to my kids, regardless of how I'm feeling," because at the end of the day, it's about their success, not my success.
Love it. So I'll take us out here, guys. Legacy Project number 26. And again, want to thank Q for coming on our show today and just laying it down. And so we're here every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. PST. We weren't on Instagram today, but we're here live on our Zoom call. And we'll see you next week. We've got a bunch of guests coming on. And if there's anything you want us to share or talk about, our format is really this. It's to really bring families together. That's the core. It's fathers and sons, and fathers and daughters, and mothers and sons, and down the list. We want to really figure out a format to heal, talk about things that are really uncomfortable. We believe that the more conversations you have, the more intimacy you can have. And so Q brought it today. And so we want to thank everybody for joining us, and we'll see you on next week. Take care.
Thank you.